Yes, I think so. Yeah.
I know I wanted to watch that one.
Okay, so my goal for today's lab is twofold. One, I just want to sort of give you an overall picture of this second lab exam. And then two, we're going to look at a few fish dissections. Okay, that includes a dogfish, shark, and a drum, freshwater drum. And we have the animals for you to dissect if you want, or I can do a demo. There's already a lot of materials up on Canvas for this lab exam. There are videos, PowerPoints, things like that. That's because last year, remember last year, this time was when we all went into hiding. So I had to do a lot of work last year already to sort of get this stuff online for people. So that works well. That works in our favor. As you can probably imagine, the second lab exam is going to be a blank sheet, 50 questions. You're going to come in, there's going to be dissection pans. There'll be a dissected animal with a little pin through some organ, and I'll just ask you the name of that, what's it do, and then maybe which phylum, subphylum, or class is the organism in. Okay, and the organisms are basically, we have a dogfish that's a representative of cartilaginous fish, and then we have either a drum or a trout as a representative of bony fish, and we have frogs, amphibian, iguana as reptile, and then a cat as our mammal example. Okay.
Wait, does that mean we're dissecting a cat, or are you just gonna have a picture of a cat?
There will be one that is already dissected.
I did that in high school.
Cool.
Yeah, so you probably, this was less about the dissecting and more about the knowing the organ. So the goal here being to give you a comparative sample of anatomy. Okay. When you look through this list here, you're going to see a lot of overlap. Right. On each of them, you need to know the stomach. Each of them, you need to know the liver. Each you need to know probably gonads, kidney, right? Maybe pancreas, gallbladder, things like that are going to be common, right? All vertebrates have those same organs. So I want you to be able to find those in a comparative sense, right? So that you can kind of see how, as vertebrates changed, they modified these different organs. Yeah.
I have two questions.
Okay.
I guess I'll start with the one on this. The last lab exam we had, we didn't dissect them. Are we going to have situations like, I don't see them on here, but like, would we have situations like that where you have multiple classes, would we have to know another subphylum, or just this?
Just this, but the last one had know the subphylum of the arthropods on the list that we had
For the spiders and the
right.
Which I'm okay with this not see the spider.
So this basically the only organisms, that you'll see on this will be these ones.
Okay.
Yep. So, so I want to kind of give you some basic rules, not rules, but guidance about how you find these different organs. Okay. So the thing is, if Darwin is right and all evidence suggests that yes, animals evolved, we all share a common ancestor, right, and that we have, here's the cartilaginous fishes. Well, in fact, you guys can spend a little time looking at this over here, a diagram. This shows you a huge phylogeny starting here of all of the vertebrates and how they're interrelated. All the ones that are not colored are the ones that are extinct. The ones that are colored are extant. We're living, and we see basically, here's the jawless fishes. Here's the cartilaginous, bony fishes. Here's the amphibians. There's the reptiles. There's mammals. There's birds, right? So what that tells us is we're all related. We all evolved from a common ancestor. Many, probably maybe 700 million years ago. Okay, so we're all sort of based on the same platform, but it's been modified. Okay, so if you just take a kind of a basic vertebrate, right, we all kind of look like this. Right, whether it's the dogfish or the now, there's a lot of weird modifications. You can get legless things like snakes or caecilians. You get some where the front limbs are modified into wings. But largely, when you look inside of them and you look at these structures, it's very similar, right?
Wait, so we don't have a bird on here.
Correct. But I was just going to say, if you cut open a bird, you should be able to kind of fumble your way around after this, right? Because of this, again, these are sort of the, so that could be a great bonus question, right? I love that, being able to take what you've learned and apply it to something new.
Anything else you think, maybe like a bonus or something like that? Could include a bird? Would you like to do maybe a whale or a shark or something?
Wait, aren't birds closely
Turtle,
related to
something like that?
reptiles anyway?
Say it again?
Aren't birds closely related
Yeah,
to
birds are
reptiles?
just a type of reptile. They're we see over here, here's all the, here's the reptiles, and we see birds are just an offshoot of the dinosaurs, in fact, right? And crocodilians, this whole branch of reptiles ends with the modern birds. So okay, the heart, so if we look at this as anterior, right, and this is posterior, we're going to look for the heart towards the head or the back end, generally speaking.
The heart is close to the fins, the front fins.
Yeah.
Right about there.
It's going to be pretty far anterior. In fact, when we're looking at fish, say if this is a fish where we put some gill,
Yeah.
the heart is up in here. It's almost in the throat. Same thing with frogs, right? So the heart is very far anterior, okay? I don't think there's really going to be much else. No, some of them I ask you about the esophagus. What is esophagus? Esophagus? Or ogus?
It's right, that's not spelled.
So you got an A. And a trachea. What's the difference between those two?
The esophagus goes to the stomach, trachea is for breathing,
Right.
which would be connected to gills.
Mouth through the esophagus to the stomach, right? Mouth through the esophagus to the lungs. Okay. And
They're side by side, they're two different canals.
right? And this is a big theme here. Form equals function. Esophagus, its job. How would you compare the jobs of those two things? They basically I just said form equals function, right? They both just connect the mouth to something. But how do you compare the job of the esophagus and the job of the trachea?
The contents of the things being pushed down. One's solid, one's air.
Okay, so what does the esophagus do? Is it just a tube?
No, it contains mucus, well, actually both of them
Okay.
contain mucus.
Contains mucus to
Help slide. And
To
the
make it-
mucus for the trachea is used to catch air particles and bad stuff. And that's why you
So
cough.
there's a filtering type of aspect. The esophagus actually has a lot of smooth muscle too that pushes. I think that's what you were going for. It actually has some, has some ability to move things along. That's peristalsis. Right? The trachea is just basically there to stay open. Right? The trachea is not pushing air down. The air is moved in mammals by the contraction of our diaphragm, right, and our intercostal muscles and our ribs and all that stuff. So when you look at a trachea and you look at an esophagus, which we'll do, you're going to see they are quite different, right, in terms of the way that they look. Trachea has like these cartilaginous rings that give it some structure to keep it open. The big thing about trachea is you just don't ever want it to collapse, right? Because then you're going to restrict air movement to the lungs. So, esophagus, trachea, or another thing you're going to find up in this part of the vertebrae. Now, the liver is one of the largest of the organs. Okay, so generally speaking, when you dissect the animal and you cut it open, all right, we're going to make incisions sort of like this. When you open this animal up, one of the first things you're going to see is the liver, and it's generally a lobed organ. It's big. It's very far would be ventral, right? And it has more than one part. So it's a little confusing when you see the liver, because you think, well, there's the liver, so what's this? It actually is the liver too, right? There's usually 3 lobes to the liver. And it has a weird consistency. It's almost like flaky or granular. Okay, that's again, we could skip dissections, but you really miss out on that tactile, for those of you guys who are kind of tactile. Right? So the liver's big, it's lobed. And now an organ that you're going to look for in association with the liver is the gallbladder. Okay? So the gallbladder is always associated or attached to the liver. Okay. So when you find the first really easy landmark when you open up an animal is the liver, then poke around looking around on the liver, you'll find the gallbladder. It's usually green colored. It's like a little bulb. It's not muscular. It's a little sac.
It's isn't it like right behind the lungs and the stomach lining?
Well, the lungs are going to be pretty far dorsal
Here.
and we'll see it easily in the dogfish today. And it's basically attached onto the liver. Okay, what does the gallbladder do? What's the function of the gallbladder?
Clean, liquid.
No, it produces.
Enzyme?
If it holds something that the liver produces.
Enzyme.
I think bile. I'm not sure if bile's more like an emulsifier. I'm not sure if it's an actual enzyme or not. But so the gallbladder holds and secretes bile. B-I-L-E. It's like a detergent. Okay. But I'm not sure. That's a good question, Alex. Is bile an enzyme? I don't. It's similar to an enzyme, but I don't think it's a protein enzyme. Okay. And what it does is it breaks down fats. It doesn't break them down. You ever notice? So if you're doing dishes and you have a sink full of greasy, dirty dishes, what happens to all the fat? If you take a sink, take your plates that have greasy pizza and stuff on it, put them in the sink, what happens to that fat? It's going to float to the top, and it's going to glom together in a big bubble, right? And you ever notice if you take just a drop of dish detergent and put it in there, it just takes that big bubble and it makes it into lots and lots of small bubbles. That's what bile does. Okay? It breaks it up. It doesn't break it down chemically. It just it emulsifies the fat. So gallbladder, found around the liver, holds bile produced by the liver, and secretes it into the intestines. Yes.
So it's not an enzyme, but it's similar to an enzyme.
Yeah.
It emulsifies the fats, breaking it down into tiny droplets. So it is not an enzyme, but it's actually a type of hormone, and it works with lipase enzymes.
Okay, yeah. So it takes a big bubble, which is difficult for the enzymes to get in and break this down, right? And it takes it and makes it into lots and lots of little bubbles. The lipase can get in there and break those down.
They're like AIDS. in the mouth.
When they
Yeah.
talk about gallbladder surgery, so when they mean taking it out, does it actually hurt the body or something?
Well, no, I know a lot of people who don't have a gallbladder. It's interesting, but you've got to be careful with fatty foods, right? Because the bile, your liver still produces the bile. I'm just not sure. It's probably not as well regulated when you don't have a gallbladder. Right? So the people who don't have a gallbladder, if they eat a lot of fatty foods, it can cause a lot of pain, discomfort. Okay. So gallbladder would be like here. Okay. Now, the stomach is another large organ that, and again, I like when you have a dissected specimen in front of you. I'm a big proponent of this tool right here. That's a blunt probe. Take the frog, it's dead, put it down its mouth through the esophagus, see where it goes. It's going to go from the esophagus down into the stomach. Right? Stomach is in the large pocket of the gastrointestinal tract. Okay. So generally, what you're going to see with the stomach is sort of a big pocket, big pouch. Right. Stomach is obviously involved with digestion, but mostly it begins the process of breaking down proteins. Okay. So the stomach secretes hydrochloric acid and I think some lipase, and it churns, mechanically mixing that food with the acid. The acid begins to denature the proteins. Okay. And then, obviously from the stomach, so if we have esophagus to the stomach, where does this food go from the stomach into the
Intestine,
Yep. Which one first?
small,
From the stomach to the small intestine.
which is the little stuff on the inside, long, and then you have the big, wide.
Yep. Small intestine, very convoluted, very long, folded. It's smaller diameter but longer in length. Right, and then it comes to, you'll see, it depends on the organism, but largely the colon or the large intestine, colon and large intestine is the same thing. That is shorter in length and it ends at the anus, but is much bigger in diameter. Okay. Okay. What about the function of the small versus large intestine? What's the differences in function? I know somebody that has no colon at all, no large intestine.
Okay.
Right.
Well, it's basically a backup filter. It gets anything that the small intestine might have missed. It gets, even though it's so big, it actually does the small part. It gets any excess liquid that possibly could be needed again. It could
A lot
get,
of water absorption. So people who don't have a colon,
have to drink more.
dehydration is an issue.
Like, how do they get to the bathroom?
Well, they have to go to the bathroom more often because the colon also is a storage place for the stool. So it basically it's just more of like an immediate type of
Comes
thing.
out.
Yeah. So large intestine absorbs water and absorbs some vitamins, and it compacts the feces and stores the feces. Okay. Small intestine, lots of stuff happens there. Okay. Small intestine, most of the digestion, the chemical digestion, happens in the small intestine, right? Breakdown of sugars, or carbohydrates, I'll say, carbs, proteins, and fats. Remember back to Bio 120, these macromolecules, and then the monomers, the polymer, and then the monomers. So what happens in the small intestine? We take all those linked glucose molecules, Remember, these things are all linked up together into starch or linked up into some other macromolecule, and we break those bonds. So we go from big macromolecules, we cleave it into small micromolecules, and then we absorb that. So both the digestion, which is basically enzymatically, chemically breaking bonds, and then when those become small, the absorption happens in the small intestine too. Okay. So we have digestion, which again is usually at this point it's an enzymatic process. Those enzymes get in there and break the bonds, and then the absorption of those small molecules happens in the small intestine. Okay.
And then the appendix and the large.
That's right. The appendix, and the appendix is basically,
Nobody
because
really
it
knows
comes
what
off
it's
of
for.
here, like a little pocket here. That's,
We don't know what it's for. They think it's like some immunity type thing or whatever. To say like it holds bacteria, but they don't know.
yeah, it's probably a cecum. A lot of, particularly mammals have these little chambers that house different types of bacteria that can break down glucose, break down cellulose, things like that. Why does so much of this enzymatic digestion happen in the small intestine?
This is large.
Yeah, well,
And it has
I mean,
more
the
muscle.
absorption has,
It has more muscle along the intestines. They can crush it. The stomach is acidic, and then it goes through like a filter before it gets to the intestines, which makes it not acidic, and then it goes to
okay,
the small intestines, which is crushed, and then something releases a type of enzyme.
so that's what I'm after, is where do all the enzymes come from that break these down? They're not produced, mostly they're not produced by
It's right
the small
underneath
intestine, they're
the stomach.
produced by another structure on this list. There's another structure on this list, which found,
The spleen.
well,
No.
actually, let me see. Maybe it's not on the list, the pancreas.
Yeah.
The pancreas is usually found,
Right underneath. the
it's
stomach.
only on the iguana, and, only on the iguana. But the pancreas is found in association with the small intestine. And it produces large amounts of enzymes. Okay. So, so you look for the gallbladder with the liver. You look for the pancreas with the small intestine. What about this guy here, a spleen? Where
On the right side, right? Oh wait, you have two, don't you?
and what? No, it's one of the few of these things that's not paired. Right? Kidneys are paired. Well, not one of the few, I guess.
Then it's on the left side, right? I believe.
I think so. I'm
Like
not,
if you're facing this way, it's on this side.
it could be.
I think.
I'm not sure. We're going to look for the spleen basically off the end of the stomach. Okay? Not that it's not attached to the stomach. It actually, its function is not really related directly to what the stomach does. This is just kind of like a landmark. Stomach is easy to find. Okay? The liver is easy to find. Start with the stomach, look for the spleen. Start with the liver, look for the gallbladder. Okay? So the spleen is near the end of the stomach. What does it do? We know the function of the spleen.
I can't remember. I think it's something to do with liquid.
Yep, the liquid blood. It both produces blood and it is an important filter. So there's a lot of lymphatic immune activity that happens in the spleen. And it does produce. Well, we tend to think of where's most blood production happen? When you think of blood production, what part of the body do you think of?
overt, but it doesn't produce it. The heart
pumps.
doesn't, it pumps it.
Where's your blood, where are most of your blood cells produced? When I had cancer, I had chemo, it killed my blood cells, so they had to give me this shot called Procrit, and it made your body produce more blood. And you
In
can
your
feel
bone.
it in your bones. You could feel this weird burning sensation in your long bones, and that's in your marrow, is where I think it's called a
Hemoglobin.
hemotopsis or something. The
That's
production.
hemoglobin.
Hemoglobin is that enzyme or the pigment that's in the blood, but the process of blood production happens in the bone marrow, but also in the spleen. Okay. And I think spleen appears in most of these. Yeah. So spleen is one of those things you'll find in the dogfish, you'll find in the bony fish, you'll find in the amphibian. Okay. Kidneys.
Now that's pee. That's where you get all the waste out of the pee and all that, and alcohol.
That's right. Well, and the liver does a lot of that detoxifying of alcohol. But kidney are and basically our osmoregulatory organ. So the things that are in your blood that shouldn't be there are removed by the kidney, right? Nitrogenous waste that come from digesting proteins removed. Things like salts are removed, right? If your blood has too much water in it, it's removed, right? If your blood is needing water, then it removes as little water as possible. The kidney does. So osmoregulatory, basically, we're talking about the balance of water and salts, sugars, waste products, right? You wake up in the morning, your urine is very yellow. Why? Because your body has been removing a lot of those things from your blood overnight. If you drink a lot of water, your urine becomes clear because there's not as much of the solute in the solvent. Yes.
What is the lactic acid from that also goes to the kidneys from workouts and then the muscles?
Is it?
Yeah.
That's removed there too, lactic acid?
Yes, that's why your pee's yellow, because it's pulling out all the toxins and lactic acid. That's what makes it also dark. It's all the minerals that make
Okay. I know uric acid, like urea and things.
it. It's from like workouts. It makes
Okay. So that's the filtering organ, and it regulates this osmotic balance. Yes,
Where would it be on the diagram?
okay. So the kidney is going to be, I would say the key thing to remember about the kidney is very far dorsal. So if I take this organism and I put it this way, so this is a shark in this case. The kidneys are going to generally, they may be interior, they have a tendency to be more posterior, but they are very far dorsal. In fact, most everything else is going to be down here. Your heart would be here, the stomach, the liver, intestines. The kidney is going to be up, even out of this cavity. There's a cavity that contains most of these organs, and usually the kidneys are outside of your peritoneal cavity, right? So if you think about, boxers, and one of the sort of devastating punches is a kidney punch, right? It's back here, almost on the outside, almost in your back.
Yeah.
Right? Not in here. This is where your intestines are.
right there.
Kidneys are far back. So basically, when you do a dissection, to get to the kidneys, you almost have to get all this stuff out of here. You really have to push all the intestines and things out of the way. And the kidneys may be like back here. Okay. So kidneys, the key thing here is dorsal, i.e. up towards the back. Okay. Now, I think if you sort of remember these rules of thumb, that when you get, by the time you get to the cat, you can pretty much go through it without really, I shouldn't need to tell you every little thing. I mean, I'm happy to do it, but I'm saying you're going to see those patterns as we progress from a lower vertebrate, like the shark, and then go to the more derived groups, like the mammals. Okay. So that, I think,
The gonad.
and the gonads are going to be associated with the kidney too.